today, Jennifer Eskew. Her book's coming out. The buzz is starting. Oh my goodness. And you decided you're going to bring guests on and co-host with me and come up and bring people that you feel are worthy of the platform. So who's our guest today?
Neil, if you will welcome retired Sergeant Patrick O'Donnell. He was of the Milwaukee Police Department. And lately, how I found him was through the Facebook group Cops and Writers, which he started. And it's now a podcast as well and on YouTube. Additionally to that, he is a writer doing a lot of crime fiction books. He's got at least 5 books that I know of out from the Brew City Blues. That'd be right there in Milwaukee. And then his most recent one, The Good Collar. So, Patrick, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself besides that?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on this show. And secondly, Jennifer, I couldn't be more excited for you. The first book is just, it's a combination of, you're so excited, you're so happy, and you're terrorized at the same time. You're like, oh my God, this is so frightening. You're literally putting yourself out there.
It is.
And I have so much respect for anybody who writes a book and goes through all the rigmarole because it's a ton of work. It really is. I've published 10 books either under my name, pen names, uh, co-written, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a beast. It really is.
Yeah.
So good on you, Jennifer. I'm super excited that you did this. But as far as I go, I'm just some guy that grew up in the south side of Chicago, wound up in Wisconsin, and worked for the Milwaukee Police Department for 25 years, made the rank of sergeant. I was a sarge for, oh boy, about 15 years out of my 25. Actually, a little more than that, 17 years out of my 25.
Mm.
And I had a great career. I spent all of it in patrol. I had the front row seat to the greatest show on earth, I think. Of course, it had its ups and downs as anything else. And I I never worked an inside job. I was always on the street with, quote unquote,
Nice.
my guys. Yeah,
That's nice.
it
That's good.
really is. I mean, there is some admin stuff you have to do as a sergeant. You're in charge of, like say, I was one of 5 sergeants that's in charge of late shift, and that's, like 23, 25 cops, depending. But
Mm.
probably the funnest I ever had, the best time was when I was in charge of a late power shift, which was 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just off the chain. You were always busy. It was
Those
great.
those are fun shifts. That's a really
They
fun.
are, they are. And I had 21, 22 cops, and more than half of them were special cars. I had my own little gang unit. I had a
Mhm.
tavern car where we enforced like liquor regulations, etc., on different bars. So it was like doing cool undercover stuff every now and then. And I thought it was the best career ever. But you know, all good things do come to an end. And it's like, okay, I knew I was gonna pop smoke at 25 years. It's
There you
like,
go.
all right, if you want to maximize that pension, that's what you got to do. So I'm a big fan of the saying, dig the well before you're thirsty. So I'm right around 20 years and I'm thinking, what's next? I'm not really
Right.
sure. So I actually wrote a book about how to buy a car a long time ago. I had a 4-year degree in sociology. So that qualified me to be a car salesman, a bartender, and yeah, a restaurant manager. So that's what I did until I was a cop. And I continued to help people buy cars. People enjoy going to a car dealership about as much as the dentist or public speaking.
Yeah.
So
Very, very
I,
true.
yes, so I wrote a book. I put it up on Amazon after navigating around the traditional publishing thing, and that wound up being a disaster. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to throw it up there myself. It was a glorified PDF. And I wrote it under a pen name because I didn't want the department to know because I'd have to get approval, and they're a bunch of morons. They wouldn't even understand it. The chief would just say no. I know that's what would happen. So I'm like, I'll do it on the down low. What's the worst thing that could happen? And it actually sold some copies, and it was a light bulb moment. I'm like, because I'm no super student. I'm no like, I struggled through college. I got kicked out twice. I partied way too much. I was working a full-time job, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, ugh. And I'm dyslexic. I mean, I was if you would have told me, like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, yeah, you're going to be an author, you've written 10 books, I'd laugh in your face. I'm like, oh, hell no. So I told a buddy of mine that was also a sergeant. I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm putting up my own book. And he's like, that's a good idea. So he wrote a book. It was a post-apocalyptic book. I'll take you back a little. This is the gold rush of Amazon, where you could
Wow.
self-publish books and there wasn't a lot of competition. You could kind of throw it against the wall and see what happens. He made
Hmm.
over $10,000 in a
Wow.
year on this one book that wasn't very well written. The editing was horrible. The cover was terrible. And I'm like, I can do that. I could put up something that's got really bad. So I wrote a post-apocalyptic book and I missed the wave. I didn't catch that wave. So it didn't do great. So, but I did wind up going to book conferences, writer conferences, and inevitably, and you're going to know this, Jen, whenever you go somewhere, people find out you were a cop. It's just
Yeah.
inevitable. I'm not wearing a t-shirt or a sandwich board saying I was a cop or I am a cop. But they were very respectful and very kind. They're like, "Hey, thanks for your service. Hey, would my character need a search warrant for this scenario? Would
Hmm.
my character be able to kick down the door in this scenario?" And
Hmm.
inevitably, I'm getting flooded with all these questions. And there were authors there that made a ton of money and were very successful. And, one guy kind of put me off to the side and he's like, I know exactly what you should do. And I'm like, what's that? He said, you should write a couple of books that are how-tos for writers. So I wrote two books called Cops and Writers. The
Oh,
first one, From the Street to the Academy, the second one, Crime Scenes and Investigations, specifically for writers who wanted to get their police facts straight.
so
And
that
I'm
kind of that spurred you pretty well there. That.
Yeah, so I started the Facebook group. It was me, my editor, and two buddies. And I just kind of did it on a lark. I'm like, well, I got to promote these books. So I started the Facebook group, and before I know it, there's 8,500 people in there, and the Wall Street Journal is doing a story about it. And I'm like, never didn't see that coming. And it's worldwide. And then I started going on podcasts, being a guest to promote the books. Then I thought to myself, I could start my own podcast. I will promote my own stuff. And I enjoy talking to people. I mean, cops are natural talkers, obviously. We have to communicate with people. And I was a DJ back in college. So being behind a microphone was not a scary thing to me at all. So I started the Cops and Writers podcast, and it's 4 years now, and it has blown up. Oh my God, it has become its own beast. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is so cool. Now I've got ads, I've got sponsors. I mean, just I didn't see it coming. So I just
Wow.
keep on writing.
Yep. Well, you've done really well. I was going to ask, how did the Wall Street Journal find you? Did just somebody just looking through Facebook and said, "Hey, this is
I've
it"?
got I've got more than one New York Times best-selling author in the group.
Ah, okay.
And she wanted I right now her name escapes me, but she's friends with, I think his name was Jeffrey Trattenberg. He is a reporter for the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, I believe that's what I remember.
Yeah, and he wanted to join, and I vet everybody because this could be a very predatory rich environment where people,
Yes.
when you're writing your first book and you don't know what's what, there's a lot of scam artists out there that'll be more than happy to take your money. I'm going to make you a star, you just have to give me $10,000, and just all kinds of empty promises, etc. So I make sure there's nobody trying to get into that group to take advantage of the people that are in there. So I look to see, where you work, blah, blah, blah. And it's like Wall Street Journal reporter. And I'm like, really? Okay. And then the next day he called me. He got my phone number. I'm in the gym and he called, hey, this is Jeff from Wall Street Journal. I'm like, yeah, sure it is. And he said, no, really, I am. And I'm like, all right, I guess you are. So that's how the Wall Street Journal thing happened. He interviewed me just on the spot for like an hour, and then we did another interview later.
Wow.
Wow.
I think it's interesting in the fact that you put yourself out there, You never knew where that was going to take you. And now you're like, where to go next? Because this is the challenge we all deal with is once we get some notoriety, there's more and more expectations for us now. What are we going to do next? How can I up what I've accomplished? Are you dealing with that at all?
Yes. The last book that I wrote was The Good Collar, and I started writing the sequel to that book, and it did well, but you don't want like the sophomore book to fall on its face.
Yeah.
That is very common in this business. It's common in the music business. It's common, whatever. That's tough. And again, you're just like, what is next? And right now, the podcast, I got picked up by the Radcast network,
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
my
Cool.
downloads have it's incredible how much that has helped me.
I
What is it?
like
Radcast.
Yes,
What is Radcast?
it's just the name of the company. He's the owner of the network, has probably about 20 podcasts. It's a fairly new podcast network.
But it helped in the way of getting downloads from that
Oh
network.
Lord, yes. Yeah.
And
Once
then
you're in a
bringing them to
network,
then the people start downloading from other places because of the network.
yes. And they've got the juice where, for the longest, it's just me. I was a one-man show.
Yeah.
And they help as far as ads, sponsorships, and yeah, making you more visible, I guess is the best way. Throwing
Mhm.
you out there even more. And it was going along well. According to Listen Notes, I was in the top 5% of all podcasts. Now I'm in the top 2.5%.
Nice.
Nice. Very good.
Yeah, so yeah,
All that from
it's been
a book about a car, buying a car to
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I never would have thought it.
that's really neat. Um, what's some of the most common questions that you get asked on the or that we get asked on the cops and writers that you've seen to more
Uh,
common
some
things?
some search and seizure stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
when do I need a warrant for this? I think recently there was one where, it's a affluent person and the maid answers the door. The owners aren't home. Can the maid give the cops permission to search the house?
Okay, a little more complex or a little more.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
short answer is no.
Yeah.
That's a no-no. And whenever in doubt, get the search warrant, because
Yeah.
that's your
Get the
gold
paper.
seal.
Yeah. Get the
Yeah,
paper.
you can't go wrong with that. And remember, this is an international group, so
Oh yeah.
there are some countries that have zero exposure to guns. And
Mm.
with crime fiction, of course, there's going to be a gun,
Always.
involved in most stories. So they ask about guns because they literally have no idea. So
Yeah.
that's very common as well. And then, like police culture, there's a lot of my answer to that, my dog wants
Ah.
to come up and say hi. That's Clark.
Hey
Hi.
Clark. Hi Clark.
But people want to know, is like, well, is there really that much like dark humor? And how do you deal with all the stress? And how do you decompress? Et cetera, et cetera. So those are some of the most common questions.
Can you remember what's the oddest question you've ever seen? That's
Oh,
actually that's still in the cops and writers because I know every once in a while we get people asking questions that need to go to either trauma or to somebody legal. But
yeah, when somebody says, asks, okay, my suspect or main character was shot 5 times in the chest. Is he
yeah,
gonna live? Well, it all depends where, and what kind of gun and how far away and what kind of bullet, and
Hmm. Are they
there's a
standing in the operating room at the time?
yeah, yeah. Yep. So yeah, that's probably like the medical stuff,
Yeah,
that's, I would say that's very popular as
it's
well.
different.
Absolutely. And what do you think your ultimate goal is as an author? What do you want to accomplish?
Boy, you know what? I don't care about being a New York Times best-selling author, but I would like it to be able to support m my family to where I could spoil my kids, go on a vacation, and not worry about money. I'm living on a pension right now, and the books, they do well, but I would just love to have that disposable income from the books. I think that would be outstanding. And the ultimate is you are being of service when you're writing any kind of book, either fiction or nonfiction. If it's fiction, it's entertainment. We all need an escape sometimes, right?
Yes.
The world can be a big, scary place, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. Why not read a story about, a police chaplain that's a serial killer? Just for funsies, like the cops and writers books that I've written, I have sold a whole bunch of those, and they've helped a ton of crime authors. So being of service, the same thing, I don't charge anything for the Facebook group, and it chews up a bunch of time. I've got volunteers that are my admins. I've got what, 6 volunteers that do most of my admin stuff for me and make sure everybody behaves and isn't acting too stupid, et cetera, and follows the rules. So yeah, my ultimate goal again is to have enough from this that, like I said, I can spoil my kids, I can spoil my grandkid, and just do something like that. That'd be awesome.
That's awesome. That's the fun part of this, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Fantastic. I guess Jennifer, what else like we could talk? I mean, having two former police officers, law enforcement on, what do you think is the misconceptions for both of you guys? I'm gonna ask that question to both of you guys of how law enforcement is and the reputation that they have.
You want to take it, Johnny, or do you want me to?
Well, we'll probably give this both of it a try. I
Sure.
think the bigger thing, I just saw somebody post something like this the other day. They'll have this attitude. They'll assume that law enforcement immediately has an attitude, and that maybe we're cocky or that we're full of ourselves or that everything. And I don't think that's really true. I think that's misjudging most law enforcement, because I know, and when I was in uniform and even when I was an investigator, most of the time when I approach people, I have to find out what's going on. So I have to ask questions and I have to be very observant. But I'm not trying to get into somebody's businesses other than to find out if there's something I can be of service to, or if they need my assistance. And if not, I'm going to get back in the car and move on because they don't need me there. But if they do need me, let's find out what needs to be done. Is it a medical issue? Is there a dispute between some people that have maybe been in a road rage incident? Is this an accident that just doesn't look like your typical, accident because it's not, a lot of metal and glass broken all over the place? But getting that information and getting it quickly. And so sometimes maybe people take that as, we think we're in charge or we're cocky or whatever, but somebody has to be in control. Someone has to take control of these situations when you come up on them. And so I don't think anybody's trying to be bossy or trying to ruin somebody's life all of a sudden.
Yeah, I would concur with that. And, Hollywood, I'll pick on Hollywood a little bit. It seems like there's like two cookie cutters, you know, for cops, either the stoic, Joe Friday, just the facts,
Right.
never cracking a smile, and I see that, like on these stupid, TV shows like SWAT or The Rookie or whatever, and it's like everything's so serious, and blah blah blah, and I'm like, yeah, there is a time where you have to be super serious.
Yeah.
About 90% of the time, we're not. Spoiler alert. We're trying to make each other laugh. We're trying to, because of the serious stuff, there's got to
Yeah.
be a release. It's like these TV cops are walking around with, the sticks, shoved up their butts, and they
Yeah.
just have zero personality. Or it's the wild and crazy cop, it's the Martin Riggs from Lethal Weapon that's out of control, and he's on the edge, and that kind of thing where, I'm going to break all the rules and I'm going to do that. You're going to be in prison if you're doing what you say you're going to be doing. You're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your pension, and you're going to go to prison if you're going to,
Yeah.
start, damn that Constitution. I don't need to follow that, or, the department rules. They don't have a boss. You never see a boss, or it's just a total beta boss. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, go ahead, go
Yeah.
ahead and do this thing that I just told you not to do. Oh, that was naughty. Don't do that again. So there's no middle ground. And I understand, it's Hollywood. It's got to be entertaining. It's, the reality is it's like, okay, you're chasing a stolen car at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's going on for like maybe 10 minutes, which is a very long pursuit. And car crashes, car runs out of gas, car just incinerates, the
Yeah.
tire falls off, whatever. And of course, there's a bunch of dope and a gun in the car and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's exciting. Your heart's pumping. There's all kinds of adrenaline. Now there's 6 hours of paperwork.
Yes, the paperwork.
Yeah, that is not shown. And it's like, oh, and the guy that you just arrested, he has a very severe case of the miseries where you have to take him to the hospital. When somebody's in your custody, you're married to them. That
Very
means their
much.
well-being is much. You have to take care of them. They can't just like check out of the jail and say, I'm just going to go to the ER. I promise to be back within an hour. It's like, no. So that's
Yeah.
boring. And that's a big part of the job too. But I understand that Hollywood can't show you typing a report for 5 or 6 hours, but you can kind of condense that and at least have that feel to it.
And Hollywood doesn't show it, and the different things didn't show it, and it's not all the just chaos, and it's stressful, but yet you're not seeing the stuff that's not interesting on
Yeah,
TV.
absolutely.
No, they don't. They get to, everything is interesting when it's a Hollywood script. Everything. My favorite show used to be NYPD Blue, and part of the reason that I really enjoyed it is because they actually did discuss the paperwork in just about every episode.
They
You
did.
either had the suspect sitting down with the legal pad, and Sipowicz or somebody sliding it over to him and saying, "Hey, you need to express some remorse. You need to write
Yep.
that out." And I used that all through the 90s.
So have I.
Everybody who knew
Absolutely.
I brought the yellow legal pad. I brought the pen. I explained to them about letting the judge know their side of the story and expressing remorse. They had watched the TV show just like I had, and they were programmed, and so they would fill out the information and do all this, and it was written out nice. But they also talk about writing their fives, which is their reports, and guys staying in late, working. That's like one of the few cop shows that ever really, that I can recall, that actually showed them having to do paperwork.
Yeah, I enjoyed Alcoholic Sipowicz. That was like completely out of control. That was when he was funny. Then he got all
The
serious.
early Sipowicz, yeah.
Yes, I really enjoyed that. I thought that was good humor, but I like Southland as well. I thought that really
Yeah,
it caught the flavor of the banter between the cops,
very
and it
much.
showed the difference between detectives and patrol, so the investigative bureau and the patrol bureau, and how they work together, and not one isn't more important than the other. A
No,
lot of police shows will glorify the detective bureau over the patrol bureau, and when it comes to chases, getting into gunfights and all that, 99% of the time it's the patrol cop. It's the cop
it's
that's in
it's
the
super.
field that
Yeah,
they happen upon, an ambush, or
yeah,
they're the first ones going to that bank robbery.
yeah.
It's not an FBI, a team of FBI agents that like come out of thin air and like
Yes, they do.
they do not. So that's
Yeah.
another misconception. And one more that just drives me bananas is there's an officer involved shooting where an officer is forced to shoot and kill somebody, and they're back on the street in like a couple of hours, eating donuts and high-fiving each other. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it doesn't
No,
work.
zero reality there on any of that.
Yes.
And I have
I was,
seen questions in the group about that, and you're
yes,
trying to explain to people that no, they're not going to come back to the case just because that was their best friend or their partner.
correct.
They're still going to be out of the job for a while.
Well, and the thing is, I was the incident commander for 7 of those. The last
Mhm.
two, I was a block away when they occurred,
Wow.
and I was in the thick of it. And I've never seen a cop go back to full duty. The earliest was maybe 6 months. The
Yeah.
longest I've seen is a year. And you're riding the pine. You're literally behind a desk, and it's for their own good, but it plays havoc on your mind. I've had lots of, like one of my partners shot and killed 7 people
Hmm.
in his 35 years. And it will scramble your brains. It's something that we all knew we might have to do, and we accept that, but nobody wants to go out and do that. Nobody wants to go through that because it's it's so traumatic for obviously the victim who is now dead. I won't say victim, the suspect who is dead, But the suspect's family, everybody's got a family.
Everybody does, and
Yeah,
and
they've got to deal
they're
with that.
grieving too. I mean,
Yeah, but the worst part though is the poor cop
yeah,
who, the news is gonna, if it's even halfway doesn't look perfect, the media is gonna just roast them. And these cops have families.
Exactly.
They got
very,
wives, husbands, kids. I've dealt with the children of cops that were involved in something like that, and they literally thought there'd be like torches and pitchforks in their front yard. They're like, they're coming for us, Dad. They're coming for us. I saw it on Facebook, or whatever, and I'm like, oh God, it's so
yeah.
sad.
Well, fantastic, Patrick. Where's the best place people can listen to the podcast and purchase your books?
Cops and Writers is the Facebook group. Cops and Writers is my website. I am Amazon exclusive, and the Cops and Writers podcast as well.
All right. We appreciate it. That's great stuff. And Jennifer, soon her
Thank you,
website
man.
will be up. We appreciate it.
Yep.
You help Jennifer promote that book. It's going to be an exciting book for sure.
Absolutely.
Talking about.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right.
Yeah.
That you're